So, on behalf of Mass CEC and communities that may be considering running a Heat Smart or Solarize campaign in the future, I want to thank you for participating today in this interview. Our goal today is to capture your experiences and the knowledge you gain from running your campaign so that it can be passed on to other communities in Massachusetts. And for our viewers today that may be less familiar with Solarize and Heat Smart, these programs seek to increase the adoption of small-scale solar electricity and clean heating and cooling technologies in participating communities through grassroots educational campaigns that are driven mainly by local volunteers. And so these community-led campaigns really help simplify the process of installing clean energy systems by pre-vetting an installer and offering transparent pricing for homeowners afterwards. So now I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Charlotte Fall, and I'm the Community Clean Energy Fellow at Mass CEC, helping to develop the Solarize and Heat Smart Toolkit. I'm joined today by Kat Vanderstraten, who was the solar coach for Wayland when they participated in 2017 and in 2012. And I'll share that in 2017, their community partnered with the towns of Sudbury and Lincoln to run a joint Solarize campaign. So let's get started. On that note, could you quickly introduce yourself and briefly explain your role and responsibilities as a solar coach in Wayland's campaign?
I've been a community organizer from the grassroots since 2010. And working with the transition model, and energy is one of the domains that transition looks at to transition, of course, one's energy to more localized sources. So as a solar coach, in both years, I helped organize the first stage, which we thought of as the application to the Mass CEC. So before that, we already had a lot of interest in solar, and we gauged the community first before applying in whether there would be interest. So I was involved in that, doing some marketing research. We also, as solar coaches, were the go-between between potential customers and the installers. So we were the people who brought the trust into the household. We translated. Sometimes some translation was needed. Sometimes when people looked at the contracts, which could be quite involved, they needed just someone to work through that with them. Solar coaches, we did that as well. We wrote articles in our local newspaper. We had billboards out. We basically worked very closely with the installers and the representative from the installer for our town to get the word out and to take questions, because a lot of the people in the town who had questions would rather ask the solar coaches whom they trusted. These were local people that they knew than the installer representatives.
Can you tell me a little bit about your first 2012 Solarize campaign and how you promoted solar PV in that campaign?
Yes. So in 2012, there was only a choice of solar PV. There was no other technology we could choose. So it was a solar PV campaign. It was in the second year of the program. So when we heard about this, we looked at the 2011 campaign and all the great learnings that came out of that one. And one of the learnings was that it takes time, and 6 months is great to get real pent-up demand, and it gives you, having that deadline gives you a great goal to work towards. But we realized that it would take a little longer to make people aware of this. And we also realized that the timing was important. And I believe in 2012, we started in February or something like that, which was great because we finished before summer struck. And in 2017, for instance, the summer fell in the middle of our campaign, which was a problem. Nothing much happens in summer. So before we even applied to the Mass CEC, we just sent out an email. So Transition Wayland had already an email list of about 400 people. We sent an email to all those folks saying, spread the word. This is something we can do. This is what this program looks like and the benefit we could all have. And please fill out this survey. So we had a survey with just 4 questions. Are you interested in this? Would you want to help us? And leave us your email address. And within a week, we had something like 1,500 people responding, leaving their email addresses like, yes, we want this. So that was fantastic. Of course, that gave us a good indication that we would run a successful campaign. But it also gave us a long email list, a leads list to begin with. The promotion was mostly through A variety of things. We had articles in our newspaper almost every 2 weeks or so. We did a lot of open houses, which were very, very popular. This was again 2012, so there weren't many solar arrays in the neighborhood. We only had a couple. My own house, I had solar installed a year before, actually. So we did a lot of open houses. People came over, they could see the equipment, they could talk to a homeowner who works with it. And all the homeowners who opened their houses were very frank and transparent with how much it cost for them, what kind of electricity, what kind of power they were gaining from it, how much they were saving on their electricity bill. So this transparency from a neighbor was super helpful. That is, I think, the strength of the program, is that it's not a sales pitch.
If you were to name just two strategies for marketing and outreach, which would you choose that you saw being the most effective?
The word of mouth for sure, but of course, one's town needs to be well networked for that to begin with. Actually, a big one in Wayland was we have a couple of intersections that are, if you drive around in Wayland, you have to visit those intersections. So we had large 4x8 banners there as well. So people who were not on our email lists, people who were not reading the local newspaper, they had to see this. So in the end, no one had an excuse that they didn't know about it.
Can you tell us a little bit about your work with Energize Wayland and explain how the Mass Energize program works?
Yeah. So Mass Energize is a nonprofit that creates tools for community organizers. So it is easier for them to reach the people in their communities to take action on climate change. And we offer other services as well, like playbooks for event organizing. All our communities get all those services as well.
Do you think there may be an opportunity for communities looking to run a Solarize styled campaign on their own to contribute to Mass Energize's goals?
On the Mass Energize platform, Solarize campaign could be one of the campaigns that is run on the platform. What happens on the platform is that if people make a profile and they say, I've done this, they can choose the actions that they've already done, of which people will have done something already. It's very rewarding of them to go on the platform and see like, well, I'm working on my solar, but I'm already composting, or I already have energy efficient appliances. They can click, I've done this, and they get a carbon score that tells them how much carbon emissions they've saved. And their score also gets tallied in the community goal. So in that sense, the platform can be a platform for several campaigns that you could be running, and they don't need to compete either. Usually in one's town, not everyone can do everything, but everyone can do something.
What tips do you have for communities looking to run a Solarize campaign on their own?
I think it's very important for solar coaches and the team that puts the RFP together and then takes the decision about which installer to use, to be very clear with the installer of what one's expectations are. So for the RFP to be quite detailed about the amount of help you're going to get from the installer, how close your communications will be. So these are things that should be in the contract as well, aside, of course, from the pricing and what kind of equipment is going to go in there. Those go without saying. But for instance, the personnel that will be devoted exclusively to your community outreach effort, all of that should be detailed. And it should be clear to the installer that those are promises they made and that need to be kept as well. And also for solar coaches, before, while they're going through the RFP process and interviewing candidates, for them to make sure to call the references for each installer. So to call the other solar coaches who have already worked with this particular installer before and talk to them. Those previous solar coaches will be give invaluable information about how that installer works, how they deal with crises, how they deal with customer service, if there's a difficult customer. Because if there are difficulties, you can be guaranteed that the customer will turn to the solar coach first.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciated all the knowledge that you're able to share with us and with all the other communities that are considering running a Heat Smart and Solarize campaign.